In the waning years of the 15th century, specifically 1494, a monumental agreement would forever change the course of world history. The Treaty of Tordesillas emerged during a time of unprecedented maritime exploration and discovery, as European powers ventured into unknown waters seeking new lands and opportunities. The late 1400s witnessed Portugal and Spain at the height of their naval prowess. These two Iberian kingdoms stood as the undisputed masters of maritime technology and exploration. The primary setting of this historical drama unfolded across three main stages: the royal courts of Europe, the unexplored waters of the Atlantic Ocean, and the newly discovered lands of the Americas. The Age of Discovery had ushered in an era of remarkable transformation. European vessels, equipped with advanced navigational instruments and improved shipbuilding techniques, pushed further into uncharted waters. Portuguese caravels had already been exploring the African coastline for decades, while Spanish expeditions, most notably Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492, had stumbled upon what would later be known as the Americas. Europe itself was experiencing a profound renaissance. The continent buzzed with intellectual and artistic advancement, while maritime powers engaged in fierce competition for trade routes and territorial claims. This competition was particularly intense between Portugal and Spain, as both nations sought to expand their influence across the oceans. The Catholic Church wielded enormous influence during this period, serving as both a spiritual authority and a political mediator. Pope Alexander VI found himself in the delicate position of arbitrating between the two Catholic kingdoms, whose territorial ambitions threatened to escalate into open conflict. The atmosphere of the time crackled with anticipation and ambition. Reports of new lands, resources, and opportunities fueled the imagination of European monarchs and merchants alike. The possibility of establishing new trade routes to Asia, combined with the unexpected discovery of entirely new continents, created an unprecedented scramble for territorial claims. Diplomatic tensions between Portugal and Spain reached a critical point as both nations asserted their rights to newly discovered territories. The Portuguese, having invested heavily in African exploration, feared Spanish encroachment on their established routes, while Spain sought to protect its claims to the lands discovered by Columbus. This complex web of political, religious, and economic interests would ultimately lead to one of history's most remarkable diplomatic agreements, the Treaty of Tordesillas. This treaty would not only divide the known world between two European powers, but would also shape the linguistic, cultural, and political landscape of entire continents for centuries to come. Did you enjoy this journey through medieval history? Don't forget to subscribe to Medieval Chronicles and hit that like button. Help us bring more fascinating historical stories to life by sharing this video with fellow history enthusiasts. Join our growing community of history lovers and stay tuned for more captivating tales from the past. The Treaty of Tordesillas brings together some of the most fascinating figures of the late 15th century, each playing a crucial role in this world-changing agreement. King John II of Portugal, known as the Perfect Prince, ruled Portugal during this pivotal period. His nickname wasn't mere flattery. John II was renowned for his strategic brilliance and diplomatic prowess. He modernized Portuguese administration and continued his nation's ambitious maritime exploration program. When Columbus first approached him with his westward expedition proposal, John II rejected it, believing Portugal's southern route around Africa was more promising. This decision would later haunt him, though his skillful negotiations in the Treaty of Tordesillas would help secure Portugal's future claims to Brazil. The Catholic monarchs of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, stand as equally compelling figures. Their marriage had united the kingdoms of Aragon and Castile, creating a powerful new Spanish state. When they decided to support Columbus's expedition, they set in motion events that would establish Spain as a global empire. Isabella, in particular, showed remarkable foresight in backing Columbus when other monarchs wouldn't. Together, they transformed Spain from a collection of medieval kingdoms into an emerging world power. Pope Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, served as the crucial mediator in this historical drama. As the head of the Catholic Church, he wielded enormous influence over international affairs. When Spain and Portugal's competing claims threatened to erupt into conflict, Alexander VI issued several papal bulls attempting to resolve the dispute. Though Spanish-born, his role required careful balancing between the two Catholic powers. His initial bulls favored Spain, leading to Portuguese protests and ultimately necessitating the treaty negotiations. Christopher Columbus, though not directly involved in the treaty negotiations, was the catalyst for this historical agreement. His successful voyage in 1492 sparked the urgent need for the treaty. Having failed to convince Portugal's John II to back his expedition, Columbus found support from the Spanish monarchs. His discovery of what he thought was a route to Asia, actually the Americas, set off a chain of events that would reshape global politics. The treaty also involved numerous skilled diplomats and navigators from both kingdoms. Portuguese diplomats Rui de Sousa, João de Sousa, and Duarte Pacheco Pereira represented their nation's interests. Spain's delegation included Enrique Enriquez and Dr. Rodrigo Maldonado. These negotiators worked tirelessly to reach an agreement acceptable to both crowns. The negotiations also relied heavily on the expertise of cartographers and astronomers from both nations. These experts faced the challenging task of determining how to divide unknown territories and establish precise longitudinal measurements with 15th century technology. Their work would influence exploration and colonization patterns for centuries to come. Maritime experts like Bartolomé Dias and Vasco da Gama from Portugal, though not directly involved in the treaty negotiations, provided crucial knowledge about navigation and geography that informed their nation's strategic positions. Their experiences exploring the African coast and later reaching India helped shape Portugal's territorial ambitions. These figures, through their actions and decisions, didn't just negotiate a treaty. They laid the groundwork for the first global division of territorial claims, fundamentally altering the course of world history. The Treaty of Tordesillas emerged from a complex web of territorial ambitions, political tensions, and economic interests that threatened to erupt into open conflict between two emerging global powers. The primary conflict centered on the control of newly discovered territories in the Atlantic Ocean and beyond. Following Columbus's momentous voyage in 1492, Spain and Portugal found themselves on a collision course over territorial rights. Portugal, having already established its presence along Africa's coast through decades of exploration, viewed Spain's westward expansion as a potential threat to its maritime empire. Spain, emboldened by Columbus's discovery, sought to secure its claims to these new lands. This territorial dispute was far more than a simple border disagreement. At stake was control over potential trade routes to Asia, access to unknown resources, and the opportunity to spread Christianity to new lands. Portugal had invested heavily in finding an eastern route to India around Africa, while Spain's western venture had unexpectedly revealed new territories ripe for exploitation. The search for wealth drove much of the conflict. Tales of gold, spices, and other valuable commodities fueled both nations' territorial ambitions. The Portuguese had already established lucrative trade routes along the African coast and didn't want competition from Spain. Meanwhile, Spain's recent discovery promised untold riches in the western lands. International legitimacy played a crucial role in this dispute. Both kingdoms sought official recognition of their claims, understanding that mere discovery wasn't enough to ensure control over new territories. This need for legitimacy highlighted the Catholic Church's unique position as an international arbitrator. The Catholic Church, under Pope Alexander VI, wielded extraordinary influence in this conflict. The Pope's authority to grant territorial rights to Christian kingdoms made the Church a crucial player in international politics. Through papal bulls, the Church could legitimize territorial claims and mediate disputes between Catholic nations. The rivalry between European powers added another layer of complexity. While Spain and Portugal were the primary actors, other European nations watched the proceedings with great interest. The treaty's division of the world between two powers would eventually face challenges from emerging maritime nations like England, France, and the Netherlands. The treaty negotiations themselves highlighted a fascinating tension between diplomatic and military solutions. Both Spain and Portugal maintained powerful navies and could have pursued their claims through force. However, the choice to seek a diplomatic solution through papal mediation demonstrated an evolving approach to international relations. This preference for negotiation over warfare would influence future international agreements. The importance of technological advancement emerged as another significant theme. The ability to enforce the treaty's provisions depended heavily on navigation and cartography capabilities. The challenge of measuring longitude accurately led to ongoing disputes about the exact location of the treaty line. These conflicts and themes would have lasting repercussions. The treaty's division of the world between two European powers set precedents for colonial expansion, international law, and diplomatic resolution of territorial disputes. It also influenced patterns of language, culture, and religion that persist in the Americas to this day. The Treaty of Tordesillas thus represents more than a simple territorial agreement. It marks a crucial moment in the emergence of global politics, international law, and diplomatic relations between world powers. Life in the Iberian courts of the late 15th century painted a vibrant picture of power, intrigue, and cultural sophistication. The Spanish and Portuguese courts represented the pinnacle of medieval European society, where crucial decisions about global exploration and territorial expansion were made amid luxurious surroundings. The royal courts of Spain and Portugal buzzed with activity, hosting an intricate web of nobles, clergy, diplomats, and scholars. In Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella's court was notoriously austere yet sophisticated, reflecting their commitment to Catholic piety while maintaining royal grandeur. The Spanish court moved frequently between cities, carrying its elaborate ceremonial life from place to place. Portugal's court under John II was known for its scientific focus and maritime interests. The perfect prince surrounded himself with astronomers, cartographers, and navigators. The Portuguese court became a center of nautical science, where new maps were studied and expedition plans were hatched in grand halls adorned with exotic treasures from African explorations. Court life revolved around elaborate ceremonies, diplomatic receptions, and religious observances. Courtiers engaged in complex games of political influence, while artists, musicians, and poets sought royal patronage. The daily routine included attending mass, participating in council meetings, and engaging in cultural activities such as music, dance, and poetry recitals. Navigators and explorers held uniquely prestigious positions in Iberian society. These men came from various social backgrounds. Some were nobles, others were common sailors who rose through merit. Their tales of distant lands and strange discoveries captivated court audiences and fired imaginations throughout society. These maritime professionals spent years preparing for voyages, studying charts, and developing navigation techniques. Their lives alternated between periods of extreme danger at sea and times of celebrity at court, where they reported their findings to eager monarchs and nobles. The treaty had profound implications for indigenous peoples in the Americas, though they remained unaware of the agreement that would shape their futures. The document essentially divided their lands between two European powers without their knowledge or consent. The subsequent colonization brought devastating changes to native societies. European diseases decimated populations, while colonial policies disrupted traditional ways of life. The establishment of missions, encomiendas, and other colonial institutions fundamentally altered native social structures. The Catholic Church's influence permeated every aspect of society. From the grandest royal ceremonies to the simplest village celebrations, religious observances marked the rhythm of daily life. The Church provided education, administered social services, and served as the moral authority in both Spanish and Portuguese societies. In the context of exploration and colonization, the Church played a dual role. While it legitimized conquest through papal authority, it also established missions to convert and protect indigenous peoples. Missionaries often served as intermediaries between native populations and colonial authorities. The society of this era maintained rigid class distinctions, yet the age of exploration created new opportunities for social advancement. Successful navigators could rise to positions of wealth and influence, while merchants involved in colonial trade could amass significant fortunes. The expansion of maritime commerce also led to the growth of port cities, where new social dynamics emerged. These urban centers became melting pots where sailors, merchants, craftsmen, and people from different cultures interacted regularly. The age of exploration initiated unprecedented cultural exchanges. Portuguese and Spanish societies began incorporating elements from newly contacted cultures, while European customs, languages, and religions spread to new territories. This exchange affected everything from dietary habits to artistic expressions. The sequence of events leading to and following the Treaty of Tordesillas represents one of history's most fascinating diplomatic developments. Let us journey through these pivotal moments that reshaped the world. Columbus's discovery of the Americas in 1492 set the stage for this momentous treaty. Sailing under the Spanish flag, his expedition made landfall in the Caribbean, believing he had reached Asia. This misconception would persist, but the true significance of his discovery would soon become apparent. The Spanish crown quickly moved to secure rights to these new territories, setting off a chain of diplomatic events. In response to Spain's discoveries, Pope Alexander VI issued the Interquitera Papal Bull in 1493. This document granted Spain exclusive rights to all lands west of an imaginary line drawn 100 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands. This initial ruling heavily favored Spanish interests, much to Portugal's dismay. The Portuguese crown, having already established significant maritime achievements along the African coast, immediately protested this arrangement. The negotiations between Portugal and Spain that followed were intense and complex. Portuguese diplomats argued for a more favorable division, while Spanish representatives sought to protect their newly acquired rights. These discussions took place against a backdrop of mounting tension, as both nations realized the enormous potential wealth at stake. King John II of Portugal proved particularly adept at negotiating for Portuguese interests. The signing of the Treaty of Tordesillas on June 7, 1494, marked a watershed moment in global history. The final agreement moved the dividing line to 370 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands, a significant concession to Portuguese interests. This new demarcation would eventually give Portugal claim to eastern South America, though this was unknown at the time. The treaty was ratified by Spain in July 1494 and by Portugal in September 1494. The immediate consequences of the treaty began to unfold as both nations accelerated their exploration efforts. Portuguese expeditions, now operating with clear legal boundaries, pushed eastward around Africa and eventually reached India. Spanish explorers focused their attention westward, leading to the discovery and colonization of vast territories in the Americas. Among the most significant developments was Portugal's eventual discovery and claim to Brazil. Pedro Álvares Cabral's landing in 1500 fell well within Portugal's treaty-granted territory, leading to the establishment of Portuguese America. This would prove to be one of the most consequential outcomes of the treaty's territorial division. The treaty's influence extended far beyond its immediate implementation. It established precedents for international law and diplomatic resolution of territorial disputes. The agreement's impact on language distribution in the Americas remains evident today, with Portuguese-speaking Brazil surrounded by Spanish-speaking nations. However, the treaty's effectiveness began to wane as other European powers emerged. England, France, and the Netherlands simply ignored the treaty's provisions, establishing their own colonies in the Americas. This challenge to Iberian exclusivity demonstrated both the treaty's limitations and the changing nature of European power dynamics. The Treaty of Tordesillas stands as a testament to the power of diplomatic solutions in international relations. While its practical enforcement would eventually prove difficult, its influence on the colonial development of the Americas, patterns of language and culture, and principles of international law would endure for centuries to come. Looking back, the treaty represents a crucial moment in the transition from medieval to modern concepts of international relations and territorial sovereignty. Its effects continue to shape our world, visible in everything from national borders to linguistic patterns across South America. The Treaty of Tordesillas emerged during a remarkable period of intellectual and cultural advancement that fundamentally shaped its creation and implementation. Let us explore the fascinating cultural and intellectual landscape of this pivotal historical moment. Cartographic knowledge of the period represented a fascinating blend of scientific progress and medieval tradition. Portuguese and Spanish cartographers led the world in maritime mapping, developing increasingly sophisticated methods for charting coastlines and ocean routes. The famous Portolan charts, with their intricate networks of compass lines and detailed coastal features, exemplified the era's cutting-edge navigational tools. These maps, while remarkably accurate for coastal areas, still contained vast blank spaces marked with mythical creatures and speculative geography for unknown regions. Naval technology witnessed unprecedented advancement during this period. The development of the caravel marked a revolutionary step in maritime engineering. This versatile vessel combined Northern European and Mediterranean design elements, featuring a unique combination of square and triangular lateen sails. This innovation allowed ships to sail closer to the wind, dramatically improving their maneuverability. Portuguese shipwrights particularly excelled in developing vessels suited for long-distance ocean travel, incorporating advances in hull design and sailing rigging. The astronomical knowledge of the era played a crucial role in navigation and mapping. Sailors relied on tools like the astrolabe and quadrant to determine latitude, though calculating longitude remained a significant challenge. This limitation would later cause numerous disputes over the exact location of the treaty line. The period saw the integration of Arabic astronomical knowledge with European nautical traditions, creating new techniques for celestial navigation. Cultural exchange between Europe and the New World began almost immediately after first contact. European explorers encountered sophisticated civilizations with their own advanced agricultural techniques, astronomical knowledge, and architectural achievements. This meeting of worlds led to the exchange of crops, technologies, and ideas that would transform both societies. The Portuguese and Spanish became the primary conduits for this exchange, bringing New World products like maize, potatoes, and tobacco to Europe while introducing European livestock, wheat, and metallurgy to the Americas. Religion played a central legitimizing role in the treaty's creation and implementation. The Catholic Church's authority to divide the non-Christian world between Christian kingdoms derived from medieval theological concepts. Pope Alexander VI's role as mediator reflected the Church's position as the supreme moral and political authority in Christian Europe. The treaty itself incorporated religious obligations, requiring both kingdoms to spread Christianity in their respective territories. Scientific understanding of the period reflected a fascinating transition between medieval and Renaissance thinking. While empirical observation gained importance, especially in navigation and cartography, many decisions still relied on classical authorities and religious teachings. The treaty negotiations themselves demonstrated this duality, combining practical geographical knowledge with traditional concepts of papal authority. Mathematical and astronomical expertise proved crucial for implementing the treaty's provisions. Determining the location of the dividing line required sophisticated calculations and measurement techniques. The challenge of accurately measuring longitude would continue to cause diplomatic disputes for centuries, as the technology required for precise measurement did not yet exist. The treaty period witnessed significant developments in diplomatic practice and international law. The agreement's careful wording and detailed provisions helped establish precedents for future international treaties. The negotiation process itself demonstrated evolving diplomatic protocols and the growing importance of written agreements in international relations. Architectural and artistic developments of the period reflected the wealth and ambition of the Iberian kingdoms. The construction of grand cathedrals, palaces, and naval facilities demonstrated both technical sophistication and cultural confidence. Portuguese and Spanish artists began incorporating elements from newly discovered lands into their work, creating unique artistic styles that reflected their nation's global reach. Language and communication played vital roles in this period of exploration and diplomacy. Portuguese and Spanish explorers developed complex systems for communicating with indigenous peoples, while diplomatic negotiations required skilled translators and precise legal terminology. The treaty's influence on language distribution in the Americas would prove long-lasting, creating the foundation for today's linguistic patterns. These cultural and intellectual elements combined to create the unique environment that made the Treaty of Tordesillas possible. The agreement stands as a testament to the period's remarkable achievements in navigation, cartography, diplomacy, and international law, while also reflecting its religious and cultural worldview. The Treaty of Tordesillas generated far-reaching consequences that extended well beyond the immediate interests of Spain and Portugal, creating ripple effects that would transform the global landscape of power, trade, and cultural exchange. Other European powers initially viewed the Treaty of Tordesillas with a mixture of skepticism and defiance. England, France, and the Netherlands, in particular, refused to acknowledge the legitimacy of a bilateral agreement that claimed to divide the entire non-Christian world between two powers. Francis I of France famously demanded to cede Adam's will that gave Spain and Portugal exclusive rights to these territories. This rejection of the treaty's authority would later lead to significant conflicts as these nations established their own colonial empires. The establishment of trade routes following the treaty transformed global commerce in unprecedented ways. Portuguese ships pioneered the maritime route to India around Africa, establishing a network of trading posts from Brazil to Macau. Spanish galleons crossed the Pacific, creating the Manila-Acapulco trade route that connected Asia with the Americas. These new commercial networks facilitated the exchange of goods on a truly global scale for the first time in human history. The impact on indigenous peoples was profound and often tragic. The treaty effectively sanctioned the European conquest and colonization of their territories without their knowledge or consent. The subsequent contact between Europeans and indigenous populations led to devastating demographic collapse due to disease, warfare, and economic exploitation. However, this period also saw remarkable instances of cultural resilience and adaptation, as indigenous peoples developed various strategies to navigate the new colonial reality. The colonial enterprise that followed the treaty introduced new forms of economic organization. The Spanish encomienda system and Portuguese plantation model would significantly influence labor relations and social structures in the Americas. The extraction of precious metals, particularly silver from Potosi, revolutionized global trade and monetary systems. The establishment of plantation economies, especially sugar in Portuguese Brazil, created new patterns of forced migration through the Atlantic slave trade. Maritime technology and navigation experienced rapid advancement as both powers sought to exploit their treaty-granted territories. Portuguese and Spanish shipwrights developed increasingly sophisticated vessels capable of long-distance ocean travel. Navigation techniques improved dramatically, though the persistent challenge of accurately measuring longitude continued to cause territorial disputes. The treaty's influence on international diplomacy proved lasting. It established precedents for resolving territorial disputes through negotiation rather than immediate warfare. The agreement's detailed provisions and careful diplomatic language influenced the development of international law. The concept of establishing spheres of influence through diplomatic agreement would be replicated in numerous later treaties. Scientific and geographical knowledge expanded rapidly as both powers explored their respective territories. Portuguese expeditions mapped the African coast and established contact with Asia, while Spanish explorers gradually revealed the true extent of the Americas. This accumulation of geographical knowledge fundamentally changed European understanding of world geography and challenged traditional cosmological views. The religious dimensions of the treaty had far-reaching consequences. The agreement's provision for Christian evangelization led to the establishment of extensive mission networks throughout the Americas. Religious orders, particularly the Jesuits, played crucial roles in cultural exchange and education. The Church's role in legitimizing colonial expansion would later face criticism and contribute to evolving discussions about human rights and sovereignty. Commercial competition intensified as other European powers challenged Portuguese and Spanish monopolies. English, Dutch, and French merchants increasingly ignored the treaty's provisions, establishing their own trading networks and colonies. This competition would eventually lead to the decline of Iberian maritime dominance and the rise of new colonial powers. The treaty's influence on language distribution created lasting cultural patterns. The Portuguese presence in Brazil, surrounded by Spanish-speaking territories, established the linguistic divide that characterizes South America today. This linguistic legacy continues to influence cultural and political relationships across the continent. The ecological impact of the post-treaty period was unprecedented. The Columbian Exchange transformed ecosystems on both sides of the Atlantic. New World crops like maize, potatoes, and tomatoes revolutionized Old World agriculture, while European livestock and diseases dramatically altered American environments and societies. Cultural exchange following the treaty created new artistic and architectural forms. The blend of European, indigenous, and African influences produced unique cultural expressions, particularly in religious art and architecture. This cultural mixing would create distinctive regional identities that persist to the present day. The treaty's long-term legacy extends to modern international relations and law. While its specific provisions eventually became obsolete, its influence on concepts of territorial sovereignty, diplomatic negotiation, and international agreements continues to shape global politics and international law in the contemporary world. The Treaty of Tordesillas stands as one of history's most remarkable diplomatic agreements, with repercussions that continue to shape our world today. Its legacy extends far beyond its immediate historical context, influencing territorial boundaries, cultural patterns, and international relations. The treaty's most visible legacy lies in the territorial formation of Latin America. The demarcation line established by the agreement directly influenced the shape and extent of Portuguese colonization in South America, leading to the creation of Brazil as a massive Portuguese-speaking nation surrounded by Spanish-speaking territories. This linguistic and cultural divide remains one of the most striking features of modern South America. The agreement played a pivotal role in establishing both Portuguese and Spanish colonial empires. For Portugal, the treaty secured their claims to Brazil, which would become the crown jewel of their colonial possessions. For Spain, it legitimized their control over vast territories in the Americas, laying the groundwork for an empire that would span from California to Tierra del Fuego. The Treaty of Tordesillas exposed profound implications of colonial expansion. Its implementation created administrative systems that would fundamentally reshape governance structures for generations. The treaty established intricate trade routes and economic patterns that would transform global commerce. Moreover, it facilitated the creation of cultural and religious institutions that would leave indelible marks on colonized territories. In contemporary international relations, the treaty remains a pivotal reference point. From international law perspectives, it established critical precedents for peaceful territorial dispute resolutions. The agreement contributed significantly to maritime law development and influenced modern concepts of territorial sovereignty. Culturally, the treaty profoundly shaped the linguistic landscape of Latin America. It determined religious distributions across the Americas and forged enduring connections between European and American societies. Politically, modern South American borders still partially reflect the original Spanish-Portuguese division, with regional identities and economic relationships often mirroring historical colonial patterns. The treaty raises complex questions about historical justice. It represented an arbitrary territorial division that disregarded indigenous populations, with far-reaching implications for native peoples' rights to self-determination. The agreement highlighted the significant role of religious authority in international relations and demonstrated how diplomatic practices evolve. Contemporary global perspectives continue to recognize the treaty's ongoing relevance. It exemplifies the importance of negotiated settlements in territorial disputes and underscores the value of formal agreements in preventing military confrontations. The treaty also illuminates the long-term effects of cultural and linguistic divisions. Ultimately, the Treaty of Tordesillas transcends historical curiosity. It remains a living document whose influence continuously shapes our understanding of international relations, colonial legacies, and global governance. Its study provides invaluable insights into historical processes and contemporary challenges in international diplomacy and cultural exchange.